Imagine waking up one morning and the sun doesn't rise. You wait and wait, but the sky remains gray. The air is cold, unnaturally cold. Days pass still, no sunlight. Crops wither, livestock die. People begin to starve. The world has changed, and no one knows why. This isn't science fiction. This is history. This is the year 536 AD, the year the sun vanished. When we think of bad years in human history, our minds might jump to 1347, the year the Black Death ravaged Europe, or 1914, the start of World War I. But historians and scientists now agree. There's a year that was even worse. The year 536 AD wasn't marked by a single disaster, but a perfect storm of catastrophic events. It began with the sun vanishing behind a mysterious veil. The sky darkened across Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia. Daylight faded into gloom, as if the world was stuck in a never-ending eclipse. A Byzantine historian, Procopius, wrote, "The sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon during an eclipse," and Irish chronicles recorded a failure of bread, a polite way of saying famine. Temperature records taken from tree rings and glacier ice show that 536 was the coldest decade in 20 years. Crops failed, economies collapsed, people starved, and within just a few short years, plague arrived. For many, it felt like the end of the world. What caused the sun to vanish in 536 AD? Ancient people didn't have an answer. They thought it was a sign from the gods, or perhaps the beginning of Judgment Day. In the East, a Syrian monk named Michael the Syrian wrote, "The sun darkened, and its darkness lasted for 18 months. Each day it shone for about 4 hours, and still this light was only a feeble shadow." In China, court records from the same year noted, "Yellow dust rained down like snow, crops withered, the sun was bluish and dim." The darkness wasn't local. It was global. It spread across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, a worldwide phenomenon that defied understanding at the time. But centuries later, modern science would uncover the truth. It wasn't a divine curse. It was a volcanic cataclysm. In the early 2000s, scientists began analyzing ice cores from glaciers in Greenland and Antarctica. These ancient layers of ice act like a frozen timeline, recording every volcanic eruption, every atmospheric shift. What they found was stunning, a massive deposit of sulfuric acid, dated precisely to the year 536 AD. The likely culprit? A gigantic volcanic eruption, possibly in Iceland. The eruption was so immense that it blasted ash and aerosols high into the atmosphere, creating a thick global veil that reflected sunlight back into space. This triggered a volcanic winter, a dramatic drop in global temperatures, and so the sun didn't vanish. It was smothered. For over a year, people around the world looked to the sky and saw only gray. The seasons blurred. The world stood still, and something far worse was about to follow. So what kind of eruption could block out the sun and plunge the world into darkness? Scientists believe that in early 536 AD, a massive volcanic eruption occurred, possibly in Iceland, or even as far as Central America or Indonesia. It was one of the largest eruptions of the past 2,000 years, rivaling the infamous Krakatoa and Tambora disasters. This eruption sent a vast cloud of volcanic ash and sulfur dioxide into the upper atmosphere. These tiny particles reflected sunlight back into space, effectively dimming the sun and triggering what experts call a volcanic winter. Temperatures across the northern hemisphere dropped by as much as 2.5 degrees Celsius. That may not sound like much, but for ancient agricultural societies, it was catastrophic. The growing season shortened. Crops failed year after year. In Ireland, there were reports of 3 consecutive years of famine starting in 536. In Scandinavia, entire villages were abandoned. One such village in what is now Norway simply vanished from the archaeological record. Their homes were deserted, their fields overgrown. It's likely they starved, or left in search of hope that never came. And the nightmare didn't end with one eruption. In 540 AD, just 4 years later, another massive volcanic event occurred, possibly in El Salvador or Indonesia, compounding the already dire situation. The Earth was caught in a 1-2 punch of global cooling. The 530s and 540s were among the coldest decades in the last 2 millennia. Forests died, lakes froze, summer snow fell across Asia. Civilizations faltered. The Eastern Roman Empire, already weakened, struggled to feed its people. Trade routes slowed. War spread in weakened regions. In China, dynasties faced civil unrest and food shortages. And as if famine and climate collapse weren't enough, something even darker was on the horizon. From the ashes of disaster came the deadliest pandemic in recorded history. As the sunless skies lingered and crops continued to fail, the people of 6th century Europe and the Mediterranean thought they had seen the worst of it. But in 541 AD, just 5 years after the darkened skies began, a new horror arrived. One that would make the cold and hunger seem like a mere prelude. It began in the Egyptian port city of Pelusium. Trade ships coming from East Africa and India docked along the Mediterranean, carrying goods, spices, and death. The plague, now known as the Plague of Justinian, was the first recorded outbreak of bubonic plague in human history. Caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, it spread rapidly through fleas on rats, and then to people. Even Emperor Justinian himself was infected, though he miraculously survived. Many of his subjects were not so lucky. The disease spread like wildfire through Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. At its peak, it was said that 5,000 people died per day. Some reports even claim up to 10,000 in a single day. One survivor wrote that the dead were piled in homes, stacked in city squares, and thrown into mass graves. Eventually, there were too many bodies to bury. Entire families disappeared within days. Priests refused to enter homes. The city became a graveyard. And it didn't stop there. The plague spread across the Mediterranean, reaching as far as Italy, France, Persia, and even China. Over the next 2 centuries, the plague would return in waves, killing tens of millions. Modern historians estimate that the plague of Justinian killed between 30 to 50 million people, up to half of the world's population at the time. A dark sun, a frozen earth, and now a black death. After the skies dimmed and the plague swept the earth, the ancient world found itself on the brink. This wasn't just a health crisis, it was a social and political unraveling of massive proportions. The Byzantine Empire, already weakened by war and famine, was brought to its knees. Justinian's once ambitious plans to reconquer lost Western Roman territories crumbled, his armies depleted, his treasury empty, and his people dying in the streets. Taxes couldn't be collected. The economy stalled. public trust collapsed. Cities like Constantinople, once the envy of the world, became haunted shadows of their former selves. In the West, things weren't better. The former Roman territories in Western Europe, already fragmented, sank deeper into what historians call the Dark Ages. Trade routes disintegrated, roads crumbled, literacy and art declined. In Gaul, one monk wrote in his journal, "The libraries are silent. No new scrolls have come in years. I fear the stories of old will be lost with us." In China, the Northern Wei dynasty had already fractured, but the climatic chaos made matters worse. Famines triggered uprisings. Refugees flooded cities. Dynasties rose and fell in rapid succession, each barely clinging to stability. India, too, felt the ripples. While records are sparse, archaeological evidence suggests entire urban centers were abandoned. Local warlords and kingdoms took the place of larger empires. The world's food systems collapsed, trade networks disintegrated, empires fractured. In the wake of volcanic winters, famine, and plague, the foundations of civilization shook. The Earth was not just suffering a health crisis. It was in the grip of a global system failure, one not caused by nuclear war or modern machines, but by nature itself. And yet, this wasn't the end. Civilizations bent, but many did not break. From the ashes of darkness, a flicker of resilience remained. In the darkest winters of human history, where the sun seemed banished, death was common, and society collapsed, one truth endured. Humanity did not give up. After the cold came slow warmth. After the plague came cautious steps toward healing. Across the world, people began to rebuild brick by brick, prayer by prayer, field by field. In Constantinople, a midwife named Helena survived the plague. Orphaned, widowed, and scarred by loss, she began teaching other women basic healing and birthing skills. Her records, preserved in parchment, show how women began taking roles as caretakers in a wounded empire. Small acts of resilience became the seeds of rebirth. In Europe, monks and scholars clung to knowledge, copying ancient texts by hand in cold monasteries. These silent heroes preserved the wisdom of lost ages, science, medicine, philosophy, waiting for a time it could shine again. In Asia, despite political unrest, agricultural methods began improving. Communities reorganized, temples and trade routes reopened. Poetry and music returned to courts and streets. What makes us human is not that we avoid suffering, it's that we endure it. Even when the sun vanished and the sky rained ash, even when disease stole families and rulers fell, people found ways to love, laugh, and rebuild. In Ireland, where crops had failed for years, there's a tale of a young boy who planted a single oak tree in the middle of a famine-stricken village. "Someday," he said, "it'll grow tall enough to remind people the world will live again." The tree still stands today. It took decades, even centuries, but from the ashes of 536 AD came the groundwork for the Middle Ages, and eventually the Renaissance. Out of ruin rose invention, out of silence, song, out of death, life. The worst year to be alive wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a long, painful, but ultimately powerful transformation. Because history reminds us, no matter how dark the age, the light always returns. So what can we learn from a time so distant, so bleak, so forgotten? 536 AD isn't just a story of suffering, it's a mirror held up to our own modern world. Today, we face our own global challenges, pandemics, climate change, wars, and social collapse echoing across continents. The threats may look different, but the patterns are hauntingly familiar. But here's what 536 teaches us: the human spirit is relentless. People rebuild. They adapt, they create, even in the ruins. And just like then, today's hope lies not in empires or power, but in everyday acts of resilience. During the COVID-19 pandemic, in a small town in Italy, an elderly man began sewing masks by hand and handing them out for free. He said, "I don't have much time left, but I can help buy someone else more." That simple act was the same spirit that kept humanity alive in 536. Looking back at 536 AD, we see more than just disaster. We see a turning point, a moment when nature reminded humanity of its fragile place in the world. The year the sun vanished teaches us humility. It tells us that no empire is invincible, no technology infallible, and no generation immune to crisis. In a small village buried by ash, years later, children found a hidden wellspring, a symbol of hope buried beneath the darkness. Like that wellspring, human hope often hides beneath disaster, waiting for us to rediscover it. If you found this journey through the worst year in history fascinating, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries of our past. Comment below. What do you think was the hardest challenge for people living through 536 AD? And what lesson do you think is most important for us today? Don't forget to share this video with friends who love history, because understanding our past helps us prepare for the future.